welcome to the VCSP Tech Hub. My name is Brandon McCoy, advisor for the Inside System Engineering team here at Veeam Software. Today we're going to be looking at restore options for your customers through our core product Veeam Backup and Replication. We're going to do some slides, kind of show you how it works, and of course we're going to do some demos as well. So let's hop in. So we'll start with entire VM restore. This is going to be the first option available to you in the GUI, and inside of entire VM restore there are a few different ways in which you can restore the virtual machines. Instant VM recovery, which allows you to spin your machines up instantly directly from the backup files in the repository. Now, instant VM recovery has been around for quite some time, but there's been significant improvements and additional features built into it over the years. As of today, you can do instant VM recovery to the same or a different hypervisor. We're going to look into the different platforms supported in a moment. Now, entire VM restore is just like it sounds. You're restoring the whole machine. The difference between entire VM and instant VM, think of instant VM recovery as a spare tire. It'll get you back on the road in a few minutes, but you can't drive 100 miles an hour on that spare tire, and at some point you're going to have to pull into the shop and put that new tire on. With entire VM restore, it takes a little longer for the restore to complete, but once it's up and running, there is no back-end or finalization process. Finally, we also have restore to the public cloud. So this is great for service providers who have customers with DR needs but don't really want to pay up front for all the overhead it takes for full-blown replication. Maybe they don't have another data center, or even if you as a service provider don't want to host the DR piece, you can have an account set up in Azure, AWS, or Google, and you can restore an on-prem virtual machine to any of those three cloud platforms. Now, kind of taking a look at the components to give you an idea. Of course, we have our core product, Veeam Backup and Replication. We have a hypervisor. These are the three that are supported for these features: VMware, Hyper-V, and Nutanix's Acropolis. We've got a Veeam Backup repository where all those files are stored. And the Veeam server is going to talk directly to the backup repository. And for instant VM recovery, it's going to run the backup files directly on the repository and present an NFS mount to the host. While this machine is running, it is locked off of the backup file, and any changes that are made are being cached, which will then be finalized when you're ready to move to production. So that's that kind of putting on the new tire and swapping out the spare. On the other side here, we see maybe another hypervisor. Of course, you can restore to the same or a different hypervisor, as I mentioned. So maybe your VMware host went down and you'd like to spin it up as a Hyper-V machine. Any of these combinations that we see here are possible. And a really popular option for an MSP is to deploy a Veeam appliance on site. So while Veeam doesn't sell quote-unquote appliances, it's simply a Windows box, physical Windows server at the client site, backing up machines. And Hyper-V, at the moment, is a free hypervisor. So just flip on that Hyper-V role directly on the Veeam server, and as long as it has enough CPU and RAM, you could use that as your DR box, right? So your VMware host goes down, you don't have another VMware host. Why not just spin it up as a Hyper-V VM until you can remedy the problem and finalize that approach? And then, of course, maybe the building is no longer there, or there is no hardware. So that's when we can restore into one of those hyperscalers. So with that, it is demo time. So here we are in Veeam Backup and Replication. I'm currently running version 11a. And I'm going to come in here and click Restore. For this, I'm going to select VMware as the production machine that I took a backup from. I'm going to select Restore from a backup, and I'm going to select this first option here, Entire VM Restore. Instant VM Recovery, and you can see here those three options that I mentioned. So I can restore back to the same hypervisor, or at least the same hypervisor platform. I can restore to Hyper-V and AHV as well. I'm going to choose VMware here, just keep it simple. I'm going to click Add from a backup file. I'm going to pick a file server here. So it's a Windows file server, decent in size, so you can get the idea of it doesn't really matter how big this is. The instant is still instant. I'm going to click next. I can restore it to the original location. This is good for small changes, little whoopsies, or I can restore it to a new location when it's a bigger kind of error or ransomware or disaster. I'll select next. Okay, so let's give this a name. This is going to be registered in vSphere as a VMDK, so let's not confuse it with the original, especially in my lab because it's still running. So we'll call this Tech Hub Demo. Okay, and if you have multiple hosts, you can choose the host you want to put it on, different resource pools that are available. I'm just going to keep everything the same for now. Now, like I said, when we're running off of the backup file, that backup file is locked to preserve the integrity of that file. So any changes while this machine is running are being cached, and they're being cached to the data store that the machine is running off of. Maybe you'd like to put it on a different data store with higher or slower I/O. That's fine. You're also able to do a malware scan, maybe run an AV scan before you do the restore. Need to give it a reason for the video. Next. Okay, you have these last two options here. Do you want to connect the VM to the network, and do you want to power the machine on? So I'm not going to power the machine on just because this is a demo. I am going to power on the VM, but I'm not going to connect it to the network because I don't want to make any big changes in my lab right now. And then I'll click Finish. Just to give you an idea of how fast this works, I'm going to come back to this screen because if I stay here too long, you'll miss how fast this comes up. So here's my vSphere. I've got this production resource pool. You can see my ATL file 01 machine here. And within just a few moments, you're going to see this machine spin up. And no smoke and mirrors here. I'm not going to pause the video and come back later. This should only take a few moments. So we may have a few seconds of silence, but we'll see how fast this is going to work. There we go. ATL file 01 Tech Hub is now shown as a machine inside of my vSphere, right under the original. It is now powering on. So you've seen that we were able to register it. Let's go back to the Veeam GUI. Oh, there it goes. It was powering on right as I was leaving. And it's waiting. I can open it from here. I can start, logging onto that machine and working. And that took, less than a minute or two tops. Now you can see here that it says waiting for user to start migration. So this instant VM recovery, is a temporary process that does have to be finalized, right? You can't drive on that spare tire forever. So under here I see the instant recovery is running. When I'm ready to migrate to production, I can click here. That's going to take the backup file and the changes and merge them and rebuild that VMDK. If you're licensed for storage vMotion, you can use that. Hyper-V, I believe, uses live migration. If you don't have these options, don't worry. Veeam has its own quick migration feature that will allow you to restore this machine with minimal downtime. Okay. Now, since this is a demo, I'm just going to click Stop Publishing, and that's just going to undo all the changes that I did. So definitely wouldn't want to click that if you wanted to save those changes. Now, the next type of restore that I'd like to discuss is going to be disk and file level restores. Pretty straightforward. The virtual machine is still running, but a volume has become corrupted or a file has been deleted or changed and you'd like to revert back. So for the volume level restore, we have these same two options as entire VM restore: instant recovery of a single volume to the same machine / hypervisor, and entire virtual disk restore to the same machine and hypervisor. Then we've got our file level restores. So under file level restore, you'll see two options. One is for Windows machines. The other is for Linux and other OSs such as Mac, Unix, and a few others. So we're going to talk about those. Let's start with the components here. Of course, we've got our good old Veeam server and our Veeam Backup Repository. So here I've got a Windows machine, and I have denoted specifically that this is Windows because the process is a little different from Windows and all the other OSs. So for Windows, it's very straightforward. Veeam is going to look in the repository, allow you to browse the file that you'd like. You can either export it to the Veeam server itself, or you can restore it directly back to the virtual machine in which it came. And that's that. Now, perhaps you have a Linux machine or some other kind of OS. There's going to be another component involved here, which is called the Veeam Helper Appliance. So the Veeam Helper Appliance is a stripped down Linux kernel, and we're going to deploy this for you. And this Linux VM is going to attach the backup files as a disk inside of itself to allow you to browse the files and then do the restore. During this process, the backups are not opened beforehand, so this is going to make the restore process significantly faster. Once the Linux Helper Appliance has added the backup files as a disk to itself internally, it will then take the files that you've chosen and restore back to that machine for you. And with that, it's demo time. Alright, so here we are in the demo lab. I'm going to come to the restore ribbon here, and once again I'm going to select VMware. I'm going to do a restore from a backup. I'm going to do a file level restore. We're not going to demo the disk restore. I think it's pretty self-explanatory here, but we are going to go ahead and take a look at file level recovery. And I'm going to select the Microsoft Windows just for the ease and speed of this video. Okay, so I'm going to select a machine. Here's a file server. Click next. Point in time where the file was still good. Reason if you want, I'll just skip that. And then I'm going to click browse. This is going to mount the backup file here. Should only take a moment. And as you can see, that was a 270 gig machine, I believe. But once again, just like the instant recovery, it doesn't really matter too much how big that backup file is. We should still be able to browse and mount to it pretty quickly. Okay, so I've got 3 different volumes here. I'm going to go into my F drive, I'm going to open that up. Now I am able to restore things at maybe the folder level, but just to make it easy, I'm going to do an individual file. This is a PDF of a report that we have from our product Veeam 1. Shameless plug, if you're looking for some monitoring and reporting solutions, check out Veeam 1. I have the ability to restore this file directly back to the machine it came from. Now, if the original file still exists, I can decide to overwrite that file with the backup version of that file, or maybe I'd like to keep the original file and compare the changes that have happened between that and the backup file. For this demo, however, I'm going to click copy to, and I'm just going to download it to my local Veeam server. Should only take a second. I'm going to minimize the Veeam window here, and boom, my active snapshots PDF available on my local Veeam server. Now, last but certainly not least, we're going to talk about the application item restores. So these are going to be our Veeam Explorers. The Veeam Explorers are part of the backup and replication package and allows point-in-time granular restores for major applications. These include the Veeam Explorer for Active Directory, Exchange, on-premises SharePoint, SQL, Oracle, and other applications. With that, let's look at the components involved. Now, as always, there's a Veeam Backup server and a Veeam Backup repository. For a lot of these restores, we're simply just going to mount the backup files once again and allow you to browse them through the Explorers and do your restore. For specific scenarios, you will need some additional components. For instance, there are a few scenarios with restoring Oracle in which you will need an Oracle staging server, as well as SharePoint and SQL. You may need a SQL staging server. For more information on when you will need a Oracle or SQL staging server, please refer to the Help Center. And finally, for those other applications, we will use the virtual lab. And with that, let's jump into a demo. So here we are back in the labs, but before we jump into the Veeam server for the restore, I'm actually going to show you how we can compare the attributes of changes made before we do the restore. So here in my Active Directory domain controller, I'm under my users, and I'm going to just pick a user at random. I'm going to right click on this user and we'll go to Properties. So let's just make some small changes here. display name, we'll call null. And office, we'll say null. Okay, we'll apply those changes here. We'll click OK. Now we're going to go into the Veeam server, click Restore. I'm going to select Restore from Backup and Application Item Restore. We'll select our Microsoft Active Directory Explorer, the domain controller we were just on, a backup point in time, reason if you need one, next, and browse. So this will open up the Veeam Explorer for AD. It's going to mount those files and allow me to do some of these point in time restores. Okay, so let's go ahead and open this up. Go to Users and Computers, click on those users, and we see Mr. Dave Byers here. So I'm going to right click here, and before I do the restore, I want to show you something cool. I can actually come to Compare Object Attributes, and this is going to show me the difference in the backup value and the production value. So in the production value, we can already see those two changes that I just made. All I got to do is hit Control-Shift and select both of these, click Restore. And so not only am I able to do these restores, I'm able to see what changes have been made. So just imagine if I'd come in and made all kinds of changes to all kinds of users and put them in different containers, changed their passwords and permissions, I would be able to see all of those and just one-click point-in-time restore. So let's go back to the AD server and make sure our changes worked. So here we are, back in users. Let's give this a real quick refresh. And we'll go to Dave Byers, we'll right click, we'll go to properties, and look at that. The changes are back to the way they were before. Now one last thing before we go. Everything that we've seen here today in the demo has been for virtualized machines using Veeam Backup and Replication. I know I chose VMware for all of my restore options, but those same restore options apply to Hyper-V as well as Acropolis. But what about physical machines? It's a totally different product. We're using the Veeam agents, Veeam agent for Windows, Veeam agent for Linux. So what kind of restores can we do with the agents? Well, maybe we could do a P2V. That's right, we can restore a physical machine to a virtual machine of VMware, Hyper-V, or Acropolis. We could also take a physical machine and we could restore it into AWS, Azure, or Google. Of course, you also have the Veeam application item restores as well for those Veeam Explorers. Now let's take a look at the components as we round this video out. Guess what you'll need? That's right, you'll need a Veeam Backup and Replication server and a Veeam Backup and Replication repository. As long as those agent jobs are managed by the Veeam server and they're in a Veeam repository, this core product here, Veeam Backup and Replication, will give you all of those same restore options. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks a lot. We'll see you next time.